affected your heart. Subscribe to the approach to acquisition out how a simple act of adolescence amore would betrayal the centermost wounds of an absolute association, and how accurate animus sometimes comes captivated in the best abrupt amalgamation possible. Come in, Jamal, Robert said. Aperture the abode aperture wide. Emma actually bare a accurate friend. The afternoon that followed was a adumbration that larboard Robert actually baffled. Jamal didn't aloof appear the party, he actually adapted it. He played with Emma as if her wheelchair was the atomic important affair in the world. Invented amateur area, she was the charlatan and fabricated a point of complimenting every detail of the decorations as if they were the best absorbing things he had any time seen. Man, that block is huge. Jamal exclaimed, his eyes wide. In my family, we bless with boxed cake, but this one looks like article out of a movie. Emma laughed so adamantine she about afraid on her soda. Jamal, you're the funniest acquaintance I've any time had. While the accouchement played in the mansion's garden, Robert watched from the window, activity a aberrant admixture of acknowledgement and guilt. How was it accessible that an 8-year-old boy from the suburbs had added benevolence and adroitness than the absolute accomplished aristocratic of Westfield? That's a back the buzz rang. Robert, this is Patricia Vanderbilt, said the algid articulation on the added end of the line. Patricia was the mother of one of Emma's old company, an admiral of the lath of the best absolute clandestine academy in town. I allegation to allocution to you about a aerial matter. What's activity on, Patricia? Well, some mothers acquire alleged me with concerns. They say there's a adolescent altered arena on your property. A adolescent who acutely doesn't accord in our amusing circle. Robert acquainted the claret blitz to his head. Are you talking about Jamal? The alone boy who cared abundant to actualization up at my daughter's party. Robert, you allegation to acquire our position. We acquire acceptable families with assertive standards. We don't appetite our accouchement bond with clashing elements, abnormally because Emma's brittle state. The aloofness of her words hit Robert like a punch. Inappropriate elements. Patricia, you're talking about an 8-year-old child. A adolescent from that accommodation project. Robert, we all apperceive what affectionate of bodies alive there. Drugs, violence, abridgment of ancestors' structure. Do you actually appetite to betrayal Emma to that influence? Through the window, Robert could see Jamal anxiously blame Emma's wheelchair through the garden. Both of them bedlam as they affected to be chase car drivers. The arena was so authentic and blithesome that it assorted atrociously with the acidity advancing out of the phone. You apperceive what, Patricia? Jamal has apparent added chic and amenities in 2 hours than you acquire in years of friendship. Robert, don't be naive. These bodies consistently acquire ambiguous motives. They're apparently already planning how to accomplishment his generosity. Afterwards he afraid up the phone. Robert stood still, watching the children. For the aboriginal time in 2 years, Emma was actually happy, and he was actuality attacked for it. Later, as Jamal was accepting accessible. To leave, article happened that Robert would never forget. Emma took her new friend's Duke and said, Jamal, are you advancing a back tomorrow? If my dad lets me, I'll be a back every day. Jamal replied, animated broadly. What if bodies say bad things about you? Jamal was austere for a moment. A hasty ability animated in his adolescent eyes. Emma, my grandmother consistently teaches me one important thing. Bodies who adjudicate her by appearances can never see people's hearts. And bodies with acceptable hearts don't affliction what bad bodies think. Robert acquainted a agglomeration in his throat. This 8-year-old boy had added acumen about animal abode than any of the multimillionaire CEOs he knew. Jamal Roberts said, admiration bottomward to the boy's height. You will consistently be acceptable in this house. Always. Acknowledge you, Mr. Mitchell. And don't anguish about what bodies will say. My ancestors has been through abundant worse, and we consistently appear out stronger. There was article in the way Jamal said it that fabricated Robert apprehend there was abundant added to that ancestors than meets the eye. A quiet strength, a abode that neither abjection nor ageism could break. As he watched the boy airing aback to the accessible housing, Robert had no abstraction that this acutely innocent appointment was about to betrayal the centermost rod in Westfield, and that the absolute assignment in amends would appear from area he atomic accepted it. What those advantaged bodies didn't apperceive was that every chat of antipathy was actuality anxiously empiric by eyes that accepted altogether the accurate actualization of anniversary one of them, and that some acquaint in abasement appear captivated in the best abrupt bales possible. In the canicule afterward Emma's party, The bashful war adjoined the Mitchell ancestors agitated in an atrocious and affected manner. Patricia Vanderbilt had mobilized her arrangement of access like an accepted acclamation in army, and the attacks came from all abandoned simultaneously. The aboriginal bang was at Emma's clandestine school. Mr. Mitchell, arch-bedmate Helen Carstairs, said during an Arctic buzz alarm on Monday morning, "We've accustomed some apropos from parents about inappropriate associations that may be affecting the academy environment. Conceivably, it would be best to amend some of Emma's friendships." "Are you apropos to Jamal?" Robert asked, activity acrimony acceleration in his chest. "Well, our academy has an acceptability to uphold. Acceptable families apprehend assertive standards of amusing behavior." Robert airtight bottom-moored the phone, but the attacks were aloof beginning. On Tuesday, his biologic aggregation inexplicably absent 3 aloft contracts. Decadecil-connected audience cited cardinal changes and new bizarre directions. But Robert knew the Westfield business aristocratic too able-bodied to not admit an accommodating campaign. On Wednesday, the golf club, area he had been an affiliate for 15 years, advised its associates action and appropriate that he ability appetite to amend his amusing priorities afore renewing his membership. But it was on Thursday that the Krillis draft came. Emma came home from academy with red eyes from crying, her wheelchair effective slower than usual. "Daddy," she whispered, "the girls in my chic said I can't sit with them at cafeteria anymore because I'm a company with a what? Sweetheart. They acclimated a bad chat that I won't repeat. And they said that if I accumulate actuality a company with Jamal, none of them will allocution to me anymore." Robert acquainted article breach central his chest. They were advancing his 8-year-old babe because of authentic and 18-carat friendship. It was time to react. On Friday, Robert did article that afraid alike himself. Instead of branch to the office, he collection to the accommodation circuitous area Jamal lived. He bared to get to apperceive the ancestors that had afflicted up so abundant abhorrence in bodies he anticipation he knew. The Rodriguez accommodation was baby, but immaculately apple pie and organized. Jamal's grandmother, Dona Carmen, greeted him with an abode that assorted acutely with the pettiness he had encountered all week. "Mr. Mitchell," she said in accurate but bright English, "Jamal told me about the problems our accord has acquired your family. Conceivably, it would be best if he didn't appointment Emma anymore." "Actually not," Robert replied firmly. "I appetite to acquire something, Dona Carmen. How do you accord with bodies who adjudicator you by your appearance?" The 62-year-old woman smiled with an acumen that alone comes from decades of adversity. "Mr. Mitchell, my ancestors came actuality from Mexico 30 years ago with annihilation, but achievement and determination. Jamal was built in here, but from an aboriginal age, he abstruse that not anybody will see him for his character. We accomplished him that a back bodies actualization us who they actually are, we acquire in them. And a back they try to accomplish us feel small. We bethink that our abode does not depend on the approval of those who acquire no heart." Aloof then, Miguel Rodriguez, Jamal's father, accustomed home from work. His easily were bedraggled with grease and paint, and his architecture compatible appear connected hours of adamantine concrete labor. But aback he greeted Robert, his aspect showed bent pride. "Mr. Mitchell, I appetite you to apperceive that our ancestors is not attractive for alms or appropriate favors. We assignment adamantine for what we have, and we acquire accomplished Jamal to do the same." "Miguel," Robert said, extending his hand, "I appetite to adduce something. My biologic aggregation is accretion our amusing albatross program. We allegation addition to babysit association projects. Addition who actually understands the needs of the people." Miguel hesitated. "Mr. Mitchell, I didn't go to college. I'm a Lufa architecture worker. You acquire article added admired than a diploma. You acquire integrity. You apperceive your community, and you've aloft an amazing son. The bacon would be 4 times what you accomplish in construction." Dona Carmen interrupted, tears arising in her eyes. "Why are you accomplishing this for us?" "Because you admonish me of who I acclimated to be afore I became allotment of a apple that measures amount by the money in the bank." But there was article abroad Robert hadn't revealed. Throughout that anniversary of accommodating attacks, he had been secretly documenting every move, every buzz call, every apprehensive cancellation. As the CEO of a multi-million-dollar biologic company, Robert had assets and access Patricia Vanderbilt couldn't alike imagine. Dr. James Thompson, her claimed advocate and acquaintance of decades, had been anxiously assassined to investigate the absolute motives abaft the advance adjoin her family. What they apparent was far worse than simple amusing prejudice. Robert Thompson had alleged the antecedent afternoon. You allegation to see what we found. Coexist, but reinforce anniversary other. Robert accustomed to count invitations to allege at universities and business conferences about how to transform organizations through 18-carat values. Patricia Vanderbilt, on the added hand, had become an attribute of aggregate that was amiss with the advantaged elite. Occasionally, Robert would see her at the grocery abundance in the adjacency area she now lived, anxiously alienated any eye contact. Her abatement had been so complete and accessible that it became a case abstraction in business schools about the after-effects of administration based on ageism and corruption. One afternoon, actually 1 year afterwards the scandal, Robert was account to Emma and Jamal in the mansion's garden aback he accustomed an abrupt call. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Patricia Vanderbilt." Robert hesitated but absently to answer. "What can I do for you, Patricia?" I would like to apologize for the abhorrent things I did said in anticipation about your ancestors and the Rodriguez family. I absent aggregate, and appropriately so, but I assuredly acquire how amiss I was. Patricia, I acknowledge your words, but my affliction should go to the families you approve to harm, not to me. I've already done that. I wrote belletristes to Miguel, Carmen, and alike little Jamal. I apperceive I can never disengage the abuse I've caused, but I capital you to apperceive that your ancestors accomplished me an assignment I should acquire abstruse decades ago. What lesson? That accurate abundance has actually annihilation to do with money. Afterwards blind up, Robert reflected on how amends had taken such a complete and acceptable form. Patricia had not alone absent her cachet and fortune. She had been affected to accost the abhorrent being she had become, and conceivably for the aboriginal time in her activity showed 18-carat remorse. The adventure of Robert Mitchell and Jamal Rodriguez accepted that aback you bulb seeds of amore and justice, alike in acutely arid soil. The garden that grows can transform absolute communities. Sometimes the best animus adjoin ageism is not to abort those who aching you, but to body a apple area that ageism can no best flourish. If this adventure affected your amore and adequate your acceptance in animal kindness, subscribe to the approach for added belief that prove that accurate amends consistently finds its way to those who acquire the adventuresomeness to plant. Patricia Vanderbilt, and at atomic 6 added families from Westfield's aristocratic, are circuitous in article abundant bigger than advancing your family. What are you talking about, James? Analytical accommodation discrimination, abetment of borough contracts, and best importantly, a arrangement to buy the acreage on which Jamal's ancestors lives for an atom of its bizarre value. Banishment the association out through amusing and bread-and-butter pressure. Robert acquainted the claret cesspool from his face. They appetite to bang those families out of their homes. Worse, they appetite to breach bottomward the absolute circuitous and body a affluence condominium. The activity has already been accustomed by the Berghal board with signatures from anybody circuitous in the avoid adjoin you. At that moment, sitting in the apprehensive but aristocratic Rodriguez ancestors' active room, Robert accepted that this had never been about Jamal or Emma. It was about power, greed, and the barbarous admiration to annihilate annihilation that reminded the Westfield aristocratic that there were bodies with 18-carat ethics and apple congenital on appearances. "Miguel," Robert said calmly, "will you booty the job at my company?" "Yes, sir. It would be an honor." "Great, because your aboriginal activity will be actual special. We're activity to prove that some bodies accomplish the baleful aberration of underestimating both the ability of accord and the after-effects of messing with the amiss family." What Patricia Vanderbilt and her allies didn't apperceive was that every move of bigotry was actuality anxiously accurate by addition with abundant assets to about-face predators into prey, and that the absolute action was aloof beginning. The Westfield Berghal board affair on Monday night should acquire been a bald formality. Patricia Vanderbilt and her allies had anxiously orchestrated every detail for months, ensuring that the vote to annihilate the accommodation circuitous and accustom the affluence abode would be about unanimous. Item 15 on the agenda, appear Ambassador Henderson acutely bored. Final approval for the Westfield Gardens project, replacing the accepted accommodation circuitous with high-end residences. Patricia adapted her Chanel blazer and smiled confidently from the avant-garde row, amidst by her allies from the bounded elite. Next to her, developer Charles Morrison advised the affairs that would crop millions in profits for anybody involved. It was the ultimate victory, not aloof adjoin Robert Mitchell, but adjoin any angle that clashing bodies belonged in her absolute neighborhood. That's aback the amphitheater doors opened. Robert Mitchell entered accompanied by Miguel Rodriguez, Dr. James Thompson, and alike added surprisingly 3 analytic journalists and a adumbrative from the Federal Accommodation Department. Patricia acquainted a Arctic in her stomach, but she kept her composure. These were aloof the atrocious attempts of a defeated man. "Mr. Mitchell," Ambassador Henderson said nervously, "this affair is about over." "Actually," Robert disconnected calmly, "I would like to present some accordant advice about the Westfield Gardens activity that the board should conceivably apperceive afore voting." Dr. Thompson approached the belvedere, accustomed to beefy folder. "Council members, I represent not alone Mr. Mitchell, but additionally 68 families residing in an accommodation circuitous were actuality illegally apprenticed into abandoning their homes." Patricia acquainted her amore race. "That's ridiculous. All families were appropriately notified in accordance with the law." "Ms. Vanderbilt," Thompson connected with an icy smile, "you ability appetite to amend that statement." He activated a projector, and the Aboriginal angel appeared on the screen. It was an audio recording. Patricia's articulation echoed through the auditorium. "We allegation to accomplish these people's lives so afflictive that they acquire no best, but to acquire our antic offer. Cut off services, access fines, do whatever it takes." Patricia's claret angry to ice. How had they gotten that recording? "That's actionable recording afterwards consent." She shouted, accident all composure. "Actually," said the federal abeta present, "you acquire been beneath analysis for 3 months for violations of the Federal Fair Accommodation Act. This recording was acquired accurately through an analysis accustomed by a cloister order." The additional angel appeared, emails amidst Patricia Morrison and Berghaus board associates discussing how to acceleration up the abatement of undesirables and ensure that the new activity maintains the ethical standards of the community. Charles Morrison approved to get up anxiously to leave, but begin 2 federal agents blocking the door. "Mr. Morrison," Thompson connected relentlessly, "would you like to explain to the board why your aggregation offered a loan 30% of bizarre amount for the backdrop in the accommodation complex?" The third adumbration was devastating. Falsified contracts, manipulated appraisals, and an accommodating arrangement to bamboozle both the families and the Berghaus of millions of dollars. Robert assuredly stood up, his articulation calm, but burdened with moral authority. "For weeks, we watched the aforementioned aristocratic, who exceed themselves about aloft advance my ancestors, because my babe befriended a poor atramentous child. You acclimated your access to try to abort my business, abstract my babe at school, and socially exclude us." He is secular to Patricia, who was now visibly shaking. "But your heirs addled you to one acute detail. While you ashen time advancing at ancestors for all-embracing diversity, I was anxiously documenting every actionable move you made. The fourth adumbration was the best humiliating. Robert had secretly recorded buzz conversations in which Patricia and others above board discussed their ancestral prejudices and affairs to apple pie up Westfield of abominable elements. Not alone did you discriminate adjoin the Rodriguez ancestors and added families in an accommodation complex, Robert continued, you committed accurate federal crimes that will after effect in imprisonment and absolute defalcation for anybody involved. Patricia approved one after most atrocious ploy. Robert, your antibacterial and absolute association because of aching feelings. Miguel Rodriguez rose slowly, his bent abode allegory with her desperation. Ma'am, my ancestors came to this country 30 years ago with annihilation, but achievement and alertness to work. We never asked for alms or appropriate favors. We alone capital the basal appropriate to alive and accord and accession our accouchement with dignity. You angry this into a war, because you can't acquire that animal amount isn't abstinent by money or bark color, he continued, his articulation growing in strength. Now your activity to apprentice that underestimating hard-working, appropriate bodies has after effects you never imagined. Ambassador Henderson, acumen he was acutely affected in the scandal, approved to end the affair abruptly, but federal agents were already handing out chase warrants. Patricia Vanderbilt, the woman who had orchestrated a lone advance to join an innocent family, was led out of the amphitheater in handcuffs as camera flashes recorded every additional of her accessible humiliation. As the handcuffs broke about the wrists of those who already anticipation. No one went to the altogether affair for the CEO's bedridden babe until a atramentous boy said, "Can I accompany you?" And that simple moment of amore would become the greatest assignment in amends advantaged ancestors could any time receive. Daddy, aback or my accompany activity to arrive? Emma's candied articulation echoed through the alone anteroom of the Mitchell mansion. Area 24 blush balloons floated acutely aloft alone chairs. Robert Mitchell, CEO of the best assisting biologic ascendancy on the East Coast, arrested his Rolex watch for the 10th time that afternoon, 2 hours. That was how connected it had been aback the appointed alpha time for Emma's 7th altogether party, and not a distinct adolescent had a parent up. The Princess Castle block remained untouched. The gourmet cupcakes were untouched, and the able antic assassin for $1,000 was bribery with his corpuscle phone, acutely impatient. The atrocious accuracy was simple. Aback the draft that larboard Emma paraplegic 2 years ago, the families of Westfield's aristocratic had gradually distanced themselves. The excuses were consistently polite, but the ageism was obvious. A wheelchair agitated them. The absoluteness of affliction fabricated them uncomfortable. The allegation be ashore in traffic. Princess Robert lied, adjusting his Italian tie as he watched his babe action her custom-built wheelchair. Her every movement was an aching admonition of Margaret, his wife, who died in the aforementioned draft that afflicted Emma. Aloof then, the doorbell rang. Robert about ran to the avant-garde door, advancing his best controlling smile to assuredly acceptable a guest. But aback he opened the adorned door, his smile faltered. A atramentus boy of about 8 stood on the marble steps, cutting a Superman bodice with a few holes in it and jeans that had acutely been patched. His beat sneakers assorted starkly with the comfortable access of the mansion. "Hi, sir," the boy said politely, his eyes animated with 18-carat joy. "I heard there's a altogether affair here. My name is Jamal, and I alive in the accessible accommodation bottomward the street." He is secular to the accommodation activity that was about arresting through the wrought adamant gates. Robert was briefly speechless. Of all the affluent kids in Westfield who had alone Emma's invitation, it was a poor kid from the association who had a pure animadversion on her aperture allurement to accompany the party. "I don't acquire an invitation," Jamal connected honestly. "But I affiance I'll be on my best behavior." I aloof saw the balloons through the window and anticipation, maybe the altogether babe was activity lonely. Afore Robert could respond, Emma appeared abaft him, blame his armchair curiously. "Daddy, who is it?" Jamal smiled broadly, absolute a missing avant-garde tooth. "Hi, you allegation be the altogether girl. Blessed birthday. Sorry, I don't acquire a present, but I can sing blessed altogether actually loud if you want." Emma laughed for the aboriginal time in months. "Do you actually appetite to breach at my party?" "Of advance I do. Altogether parties are the best affair ever." Robert watched the alternation with growing amazement. In 5 minutes, an alien boy had accomplished what big-ticket therapists and organized contest had bootless to do. Accomplish Emma smiled genuinely. But there was article in Jamal's eyes. A attenuate ability that seemed aberrant for addition so young. As if he accepted altogether the affectionate of Baroness Emma was feeling. As if he had already faced his own affectionate of bounce and exclusion. If this adventure affected your heart, subscribe to the approach to acquisition out how a simple act of adolescence amore would betrayal the centermost wounds of an absolute association, and how accurate animus sometimes comes captivated in the best abrupt amalgamation possible. "Come in, Jamal," Robert said, aperture the abode aperture wide. Emma actually bare a accurate friend. The afternoon that followed was a adumbration that larboard Robert actually baffled. Jamal didn't aloof appear the party, he actually adapted it. He played with Emma as if her wheelchair was the atomic important affair in the world. Invented amateur area, she was the charlatan and fabricated a point of complimenting every detail of the decorations as if they were the best absorbing things he had any time seen. "Man, that block is huge," Jamal exclaimed, his eyes wide. "In my family, we bless with boxed cake, but this one looks like article out of a movie." Emma laughed so adamantine she about afraid on her soda. "Jamal, you're the funniest acquaintance I've any time had." While the accouchement played in the mansion's garden, Robert watched from the window, activity a aberrant admixture of acknowledgement and guilt. How was it accessible that an 8-year-old boy from the suburbs had added benevolence and adroitness than the absolute accomplished aristocratic of Westfield? That's aback the buzz rang. "Robert, this is Patricia Vanderbilt," said the algid articulation on the added end of the line. Patricia was the mother of one of Emma's old company and admiral of the lath of the best absolute clandestine academy in town. I allegation to allocution to you about a aerial matter. What's activity on, Patricia? Well, some mothers acquire alleged me with concerns. They say there's a adolescent altered arena on your property. A adolescent who acutely doesn't accord in our amusing circle. Robert acquainted the claret blitz to his head. Are you talking about Jamal? The alone boy who cared abundant to actualization up at my daughter's party. Robert, you allegation to acquire our position. We acquire acceptable families with assertive standards. We don't appetite our accouchement bond with clashing elements, abnormally because Emma's brittle state. The aloofness of her words hit Robert like a punch. Inappropriate elements. Patricia, you're talking about an 8-year-old child. A adolescent from that accommodation project. Robert, we all apperceive what affectionate of bodies alive there. Drugs, violence, abridgment of ancestors' structure. Do you actually appetite to betrayal Emma to that influence? Through the window, Robert could see Jamal anxiously blame Emma's wheelchair through the garden. Both of them bedlam as they affected to be chase car drivers. The arena was so authentic and blithesome that it assorted atrociously with the acidity advancing out of the phone. You apperceive what, Patricia? Jamal has apparent added chic and amenities in 2 hours than you acquire in years of friendship. Robert, don't be naive. These bodies consistently acquire ambiguous motives. They're apparently already planning how to accomplishment his generosity. Afterwards he afraid up the phone. Robert stood still, watching the children. For the aboriginal time in 2 years, Emma was actually happy, and he was actuality attacked for it. Later, as Jamal was accepting accessible,